Okay, so this is going to be the tutorial on how to use all the products that I told you about the other day, Kyle. And if you've forgotten them, that's okay. I'm going to go over them again. This might be a little bit long, so this phone might cut out every now and then. So I'm going to have to edit this later, so it won't be one continuous stream. It'll be jumpy. But that's okay. So, alright. I like to have, first and foremost, let me just cover the things that I don't think you need to absolutely have. I like to have compressed air around, just because if there's some lube or whatever that's gotten tucked into some place I don't want it to be, or for whatever reason I can't use the Q-tips that I have to get out the moisture, I like to shoot it in there. It's not really that important for military firearms, because they are military firearms, because they're not susceptible to having nooks and cranny issues like that to a certain extent. I mean, they are, but they try to minimize that with their little torture tests, and that's why they've been selected to be military firearms. But for things like the SIG, I mean, it's military grade, it's mil spec, it's just, you know, it's kind of like a clockwork compared to this, which is a big piece of steel that, you know, thuds rounds downrange. It's more important to get the areas that are kind of susceptible to getting carbon fouling and to getting, you know, crud in there dry, so it doesn't, you know, attract that type of thing. So that's why I have this. So I have it on hand just in case, but just, it's not needed. You probably have it from the computers anyway, so you don't need to go out and buy it. Okay, so all in all, I have my swabs, and I'll approximate these to be about 2 inches by 2 inches, I guess. Watch comparison. 2 inches by 2 inches. I have a good amount of them. I just know from experience cleaning this gun, I probably won't need more than these. I might, but I might not. The same thing with the amount of Q-tips that I have. I probably have too many, but there they are. I have this grease that you're not going to be able to probably get down there, because I think this is a Bay Area dude. It's called Jardines. That might be backwards on the film, I'm not sure. Jardine's Extreme. Any good grease will do. Tetra is fine. That's available everywhere. It's the blue and yellow labeled grease. We talked about that. Other than that, I have my spray bottle of CLP, Breakfree CLP. This is, like I said, the CLPs, they all have different names, like CLP7, CLP5, or whatever. They're all the same product. It's just this one's under pressure. There's other ones that are spray bottles or whatnot. Also, I'm not going to use it for this time, but you can buy little spray bottles from like Walgreens and put the Hoppies or the Ballistol solvents in them and the lubes in them, and they work just fine doing that. I use these on shotguns because I don't want the CLP to touch the wood. I trust these more. It's probably fine for CLP to touch wood. It's just, I don't know, I'm old-fashioned with shotguns and rifles, so I just use these on them. AR-15s would probably be fine to use the CLP because those are military, and the CLP was developed for the military. Okay, so 1911, practically the same thing as yours. You're going to have a trigger. Obviously, you're not going to have a hammer if you get that Walther. It's striker fired. But I mean, the differences about this gun and yours, for the purposes of what we're doing, are going to be too different. So the first thing you do, always, here comes instruction point number 1. I'll turn it this way just so you can see the ejector port. Make sure the gun's unloaded. So I'm in my garage right now. Neighbors are over that way. I've already checked to see if this gun is completely empty, but neighbors are over there. If a bullet went that way, we'd have an issue. There's children over there. They have pets. Not a good deal. A whole bunch of crap over here, but yes, neighbors in that direction, neighbors in this direction, parents in that direction. It'd be very bad to shoot any of those people. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that the gun's clear. And generally for every firearm, it's going to be the same in that there is a slide lock lever that fits into a groove wherever it is on your slide. The quickest way to do all of this is to press up on the slide lock and rack the slide back. It will catch. You can then visually inspect to see that there's no magazine, that there is, if you can see this, I don't know, you have to angle it for the camera. Don't have a light. There's no round in there. You wouldn't be pointing this towards your face when you did that. You would be doing this, and you can look through it, but there's no round in there. There's no magazine, so I can release this slide completely empty. Doing this also is a good check, because that's the action that the firearm takes when it's firing. That would be the semi-auto action, and it would engage the extractor, and it would be throwing rounds out if I did this and it were loaded. So it is not loaded. And drop the hammer in the safe direction. Taking down this pistol is going to be a little bit different compared to how you take your pistol down, so I'm not going to really talk about this too much. I'm just going to pull it apart. Yours is going to be different. I have never fired a Walther before, so I can't really tell you how it breaks down. The internet is your friend when it comes to that. There's literally thousands of videos just like what I'm doing with you right here, where people have talked to the nth degree about how to remove parts of firearms, to modify parts of firearms, so we won't even get into that. That would be utterly useless. So bear with me while I take this gun apart. The majority of the polymer pistols work off of kind of like the Glock's premise, in that there is a recoil spring in the front that kind of sticks against this little hole right here that kind of grooves in. You press it and you let it slide in, and that actually functions as the spring of the gun. 1911s work a little bit differently as an independent spring. The barrel itself is pretty similar to how the Glocks are, although it has this little dingle ball thing down here that is probably the most annoying part of putting this gun back together. But other than that, you won't have that issue. Just probably explaining how later in the video I might be fumbling around with that. Okay, now to the actual cleaning part of it. I'm not going to break down the frame any more than it is the way it is right now, solely because no gun's really going to require for normal cleaning that you strip it down farther than that. I'm also not going to take down the rail, or slide rather, any more than it is already, because the firing pin is inside here, and that could get fouled up and dirty, but I doubt that it's going to be dirty right now. I've only fired it once since I've cleaned it deeply, so we're not going to do that. For the normal amount of takedown and cleaning, this is literally all you have to do. You need to remove the slide, you have to remove the barrel, you have to remove the spring, whatever it is, the recoil spring, in what other way, because you're going to need to wipe that down. It does get fouling. And other little bits that might attract carbon fouling, you have to take it off. Alright, now down to the actual cleaning. The magic of CLP is, and I've actually forgotten to take this out, so I'll zip ahead in the film while I unroll this incredibly difficult to unroll cleaning kit. Okay, so now that I've unrolled it, magic of TV, the pieces that I've pulled out are a polymer pick, which is not unlike the ones that I showed you on the film the other day. That's for pushing the pads down into areas that are hard to get to, an old toothbrush, and the rod that I'll use to ram patches down the barrel. So the first thing that I always do every time I clean a gun is I take a patch and I thread it through, and you do this in any way that you want. You fold it up to make it a little thicker, and you thread it through the eye of the needle, basically. You create some little swabby bit like that. The pressurized CLP is a little bit easier than the non to get it coated, I think, when you have only two hands as a human does. But you coat it basically with some CLP. Hold the barrel from the loading ramp side, the side where the round will actually enter the breech, muzzle pointing away. You do this because the rifling of the pistol barrel, which is the curlicue pattern that causes the bullet to twist and spin, moves in that direction. I am pushing it through and back again, which kind of defeats the purpose of putting it in from one side, but I don't like touching the muzzle because that's the last point that the bullet touches, and it is going to be susceptible to more bumping and jarring, and at that last little moment, if the bullet does get deflected a bit, it affects your long range accuracy. Not so much short range, but long range accuracy. So I like to keep that as much as possible. Alright, this is a relatively dirty swab. I mean, it's not completely dirty, but right now we're not really cleaning the barrel. We're coating it with CLP, and the purpose for that, I'll say again because I said this to you earlier, a couple days ago when we were talking on Skype, that the purpose of CLP initially, the C part, the cleans part, is to break down all the is to break down the carbon fouling and the carbon buildup inside of barrels and on the metal. So I'm going to keep jamming this through until I pretty much feel that there's a nice coating on the inside of the CLP. I look through it. I know you can't really see what I'm looking at right now. It's pretty clean anyway. I don't know if you can see through that barrel. Let me see if I can make it glassy looking. That's kind of what you want it to look like. If there's hunks of crud in there, it's going to be pretty visible to you. I mean, that's like the James Bond look, right? It's pretty visible when there's like bits of lead in there if you're firing non-jacketed bullets, at which point you then use something of the wire brush variety that's going to come in that case, the kit that you get with the rod kit. But up until that point, unless you see some stuff that's really clinging in there after you pass the patch through, it's not really necessary for you to use the brush at all. I hardly ever use the brush. And we're going to let that just kind of sit in there and start breaking down that carbon. Get this out of the way so you can kind of see it. I'm also going to run a slight line of CLP up the side of that. I'll do one piece at a time. Usually I do this all at once. That's why I was about to do that. And just take your swabs and kind of smear it around. Just run it around. You can see that my fingers are starting to get a little black because this stuff's actually breaking up the carbon as it is. It's acting as a solvent right now. On your firearm, this is the area that might be the barrel lug. You really want to get the CLP up inside of there because it attracts a lot of, actually this probably is the barrel lug for this barrel, but yours will look something like that, I would imagine. You really want to get the CLP up in those areas as well because carbon fouling really occurs there. This is right where the bullet detonates, so there's a lot of stuff that gets spread around there. Now, that's basically what I'm going to keep doing for all of these little pieces here. There's no reason for you to keep watching me do all of these, so I'm going to jump ahead until I get to the more intricate parts of spreading around the CLP. When you get to the part where you want to actually rub CLP on the spring, the recoil spring, which you should do because every now and then it gets a little bit dirty, I just kind of spray it so it's touching my hands. You might want to wear rubber gloves for this because a lot of times these lubes and solvents are petroleum based and you don't want to get that on your skin, but whatever, I'm already doing it. So I just want to rub it with a CLP and just kind of get it coated. Okay, now when it's down to cleaning the frame and the slide, we'll start with the slide first. The only real thing that you need to make sure that you do not do is, if you look in here, come on light, be my buddy. See if I can move it around. There you go, you can kind of see it. There's a lighter area right at the tip of my finger there. That is the channel down which, that little hole, that black little hole right at the top of my nail, that's the hole that the primer is struck by the firing pin. The hammer hits back here for me, or the striker fire pistol that you're going to get starts off inside here and it fires the firing pin down that channel to hit the primer out of that hole, and that's kind of the gateway to the inner guts of the firing pin. Especially if you're using a striker fire pistol, it's going to be, there's some machinations in there. You do not want to get wetness in there at all. So for that purpose, preventing that from happening, when you spray CLP onto a slide, you want the hole pointing down. That's really the only way that you can dick that up, is if you get that with some lube or anything in there, and then it'll gunk it up and cause light primer strikes, which will be frustrating because you can't fix that at the range. You have to clean it off. So I'm just going to start rubbing this around like I did the other one. Different slides are different sizes. My fingers are kind of large, so I can't really get them into the 1911's slide at certain places, but this is just the coarse rub down. I'm going to rub the entirety of the metal down, kind of more for the L in CLP, the P rather in CLP, because I want it to protect the metal from rust. When I wipe it off fully, it'll leave a coat of protection. Now this is going to be where your patches get the dirtiest, especially if you haven't cleaned it in a while. This area of metal is exposed to the combustion, so it's going to attract a whole lot of carbon fouling. And when it gets to the time where you want to get down into, and it's invariably every pistol is going to have this little slip plate right here that my finger's touching. I'm not really doing a good job with this. This part right there, that metal bit there, on each side of it there's going to be some deep channels, which this left one didn't collect a lot of CLP, so I'm going to tilt it again, spray it in the back, let it trickle down a little bit. Other side did. At this moment I'll probably either pull out a Q-tip and do what I'm doing now, just kind of rub it in there, or just because I want to be complete as I do this, I'll kind of run it up the rails. To be complete, I could, if I wanted to, take a patch and take my pick. Where did I put it? Take the pick and run the patch with the pick along these little grooves in here. These are the rail grooves, and as you can see where the pick touched, I don't know if you can see on that side, you can definitely see on the other side, it picked up a lot of crud in there that I actually didn't get when I rubbed the Q-tip in there, although the Q-tip did itself pick up a lot of crud. So you want to run the patch along there. What you're seeing here is, because I greased this pistol up a couple days ago, it's kind of like the grease is mixed in with the carbon and it's picked up a lot of gunk. And so I'll jettison that because that's pretty filthy. And you do want to wipe that off every time. You want to wipe the grease off and as much of the well, sludge that's developed as you can. And that's one of the reasons why CLP is really good. That if I were just using solvent, if I were just spraying the solvent on and then wiping off the solvent, I would really have to get all the solvent off, because after a while, I made a mistake once, literally with this gun itself when I was in Chico, that I really wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. Maybe I was cleaning late at night. I don't remember how it happened, but I basically just wiped the whole gun like I'm doing right now down with solvent, and I went to bed after I put it together, and it had a little thin coating of rust over it a couple days later when I opened the safe back up again. And so that's not good. You really don't want to have rust on your firearm, especially when it's something that you care about quite a bit. So I'm leaving that there. The slide's been wiped down quite a bit. Everything else is still sitting with the CLP on it. I'm going to move over to the over to the frame, and I'm going to make sure, I don't know why this isn't doing this. Okay, fingers are greasy, that's probably why. I'm going to spray some CLP into these areas. I don't really want to spray it super deep into the gun, into the frame, because being that it's been ripped apart at this moment in time, deep means magwell. I mean, that would be the deep part of the gun, right? Like if I tried to spray it up here, it would only go into this little trough, and there's really not a lot of places to spray anywhere else that would be considered really deep. So when you look at yours, I say it this way in a really kind of a vague way because I don't really know how the Walther is going to look. But when you look into it, you're going to clearly see that if you spray right here like a ton of CLP, it's going to run down into that magwell, and you do not want to have any lube in the magwell. A lot of people say you can lube up your magazines and lube the spring up, and it adds protection. Why wouldn't you protect it? It's metal. I don't believe in lubing the mag. I keep it as dry as possible. For me, especially when I'm competing, they get really dirty. For whatever reason, if you live in the desert, which you do, it'll get dirty and dusty in there. You just got to take it apart every now and then and just kind of shake it out. Make sure you wipe off the dirt from it, and that's fine. You don't need to lube it. There's not a lot of moving parts in the spring. There's a lot of brass fouling, and you probably won't be able to see that on the screen, but the brass fouling that I'm finding up here is occurring because when the bullets that I'm using right now, the cartridges I should say that I'm using right now, when they're coming out of the magazine, some of them are getting sheared a little bit. So there's little microscopic pieces, not microscopic, but very, very small pieces of brass fouling that I need to get out of here, but I also have to make sure I don't touch my eyes when I do this. I don't think you're retarded, but I'm just going to caution you against that. Don't get metal in your eyes. It's a very bad idea. You heard it here. Alright, so I'm running the pick with the swab against the rails like I did the other side, with the slide, because I want to get all of the crud out of these rails that I can. Now, going back to the why I said that I think it's better to use CLP than it is a solvent, other than the fact that you can be stupid like I was in Chico and leave it alone and not wipe it all off, you also have to get it all off before you put the lube on, because it'll just mix up and it'll have this little shitty mixture of lube and corrosive material. And if for whatever reason you get corrosive material on one spot in the rail and lube everywhere else, you're going to have a situation where the slide can actually, you know, jam solid with that rail. And maybe not jam solid to the point where you couldn't get it out, but you'd have to muscle it out, and that just causes damage to the firearm and lowers its value if you're going to resell it, or at least its life, which is how I look at firearms. I don't ever intend to sell them. Anyway, so they're all coated with CLP, and now we're just going to wait. I would say these parts are probably ready to wipe off, but I'm probably going to wait about 10 minutes for these two pieces to sit and break up, and I'll stop the video here and start it back up again when I have wiped all the pieces off, because in reality all I'm doing is just the same process again with the remaining patches, just making sure that I wipe it off. Then I'll show you the condition at which they look in, what they look like when I know that they're completely wiped off. One thing I forgot to say about the whole cleaning process is when you're wiping the frame down, as in when you've sprayed the CLP on for the first time, you can use a toothbrush and you can really use it to rub into the metals and get into the nooks and crannies, and that actually can help break up a lot of the carbon. I did forget to say that. The toothbrush, I didn't use it, but it definitely is something that you want to start to use when you are cleaning your guns, because it does actually get up quite a bit, and you'll see when you start using it. Actually, I can even just show you right now. When you do use it and you spray a little bit on and you work it in, albeit this is slightly dirty already, the color that it is right now, I literally just wiped this thing down and I got all the carbon out of it that I really wanted to get out, but even so, it still is taking carbon out. So you can be super diligent and use tools like that, which is not too hard. Everybody has toothbrushes lying around. Just make sure that you always do wipe it off completely. Alright, so now that the gun is completely wiped, to my satisfaction anyway, I'm going to show you what it kind of looks like. It's still somewhat wet. It's not really going to be super dry right now. You can look at the slide and you can see when I run my finger along it that there's kind of a line that you drew. Maybe you can't. And one litmus would be to put your finger pad on it and then take it off and to see if there is a fingerprint left on it. That's usually the litmus for how wet it should look when you're done lubing it with CLP. If you then took a swab and rolled over the top of that, kind of like you're polishing something, right? It'll look like it's getting like bone dry. It's trust me, it's not. There is lube all over that area. There's a perfect little coating that protects it that the CLP is really known for. It's not necessarily the solvent that it's known for, it's the thinness at which it protects what you've put it on. And it's quite nice because you are pretty sure that you've wiped everything off, which means all of that carbon fouling is gone. Or at least to a larger extent it is gone. I mean, it's always going to have like a little bit coming off because it's dirty, right? It's not ever going to be completely factory clean ever again, and even when it comes from the factory it's going to be dirty. But that's pretty much good. Certain pistols run better dry. I've heard that the Glocks run better while they're dry. SIG runs better wet. You have to just trial and error these things. Just make sure that you clean it to the way the factory says you should. Read the little manual that you get. But yeah, with trial and error and range time, you'll get a feel for how clean or how dirty you can leave the gun, or how clean you need to make it so it doesn't have issues. I don't ever advocate leaving something dirty, but you're not going to have somebody breathing down your neck. The best thing about this is you can clean it to your own satisfaction. So after you get it all cleaned off and you're done with the lubing process because you've wiped everything to that nice little sheen, that nice little level of lubrication, it's time to put the gun back together again, and this is where you put on the grease. Now, the way I view it, for all of the inner workings of the gun, all the little places that move under spring tension, that rotate like a wheel would rotate, like a clockwork would rotate. Those areas, if there's some wear and tear potential with them, lube is great for those. Like something that spins free of anything else. It's not with friction running against anything else. If it just rotates like a spring, leaf spring or whatever, if you feel that you need to lube it, it's lube that you need to use for that. But when metal rubs on metal, like especially when you look on the insides, on the surfaces of metal, when you see discoloration because there's been, you know, metal transfer, that's where I put grease. So the applicator that you use is not going to be like this, but it's going to be somewhat similar. I'm going to draw a bead for the thickness that I believe the lube should be. And I go kind of heavy with the grease. I should say grease, not lube. I go kind of heavy with the grease because I'm going to work the action for the next 20 minutes anyway, and it's going to be spreading around on the inside and kind of coming out the back. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So I'm going to wipe off the excess. I just want to make sure that there's an even coating of the grease all the way through. But some people do little spot greases, and that's fine. I'm sure that's fine. I don't do that myself. So I know that there's rubbing on this area because I see rubbing, and I see that there's some rubbing on the opposite side too. Why wouldn't there be? And then also down on this piece right here that I actually touched earlier and showed that there was some spreading there. There was some rubbing down there when I was touching it with the Q-tip. This is another area that you want to touch. Any places where you see pristine metal, if you haven't shot your gun yet, you probably won't see any wear and tear. But any areas where, yeah, it is metal and it is going to be exposed to the explosions, the detonations, don't really need to put grease there. It's mainly for you right off the bat. It's going to be on the rails and inside the lands for the rails on the frame. Those are the areas at which you should put some grease, because those are the areas that are going to rub. And I'm going to be over the top and put a little bit there too. Alright, so the phone did take a shit. So I'm back now. This is the part where I have now reassembled the gun. I haven't racked it yet at all, but it is completely oily. And if I tried to rack it now, it's more likely that I'm going to injure myself than anything else. It's probably not going to happen as much with the polymer pistols that you have because they're mottled and they're not as slick as the metal that it is right now, but maybe they will be. It could be. So I would say wipe down the gun all the way around the outside with a shop towel first, and make sure that you don't get grease on your grips, because that would make them very slippery and then they wouldn't have grip anymore, clearly. And what you want to do is then just start racking the slide, feeling it. Does it feel smooth to you? Again, obviously make sure the gun's unloaded again before you do this. In fact, I would say if you're going to clean the gun, make sure that not only there are no magazines or ammunition in your area, but make sure there's no ammo in the room. Just don't put any ammo in the room. If somebody breaks in, the gun's apart anyway, it's not going to help you to have any ammo in the room. And the more you do this, the more fluid you get with taking the gun apart and putting it back together. Actually, when I said it was going to be a pain in the butt for me to take the gun apart and put it, or rather to put it back again, to put it back together again, and I zipped the video ahead, it went together in probably 35 seconds. So it's getting really easy for me to do this because I've taken this thing and put it back together probably 80 times. I would say keep the ammo away, because the more fluid you get, the more repetitive it is, and the more likely you are to try to dry fire it and fire around through the wall. And then the biggest argument that you can make in court is, well, I didn't know it was loaded, which makes you look like a friggin' moron, because how do you not know that your gun's loaded? Look how unsafe you are. We're going to take your guns away. Anyway, cycle the bolt, that's not a bolt action rifle. Cycle the action back and forth. Maybe even rack the slide if you want to look around inside the gun to make sure everything's fine. Look at the backs of the rails. See if I can get in here closely. Can you see, where are you, Q-tip? Can you see the part where the tip of the Q-tip is almost covering right here, right there? How there's that orange grease there? Note that the grease that I'm using is orange. Yours might be a different color. That's because this, you can see on the back here, that's the ass end of the slide. So when I rack it back, you can see the bottoms of the rails have grease on them, and when I slide forward they deposit a little bit of grease in the back. Happens along the undersides of the slides as well, as you can see the slick areas there, especially on the other side where there's some groove cutouts. You can see where the grease is kind of sliding out. So that's what doing this does. Kind of works the grease in. You can start to see where there's some excess grease, and so for the next little bit of time, this stuff kind of smells, so it depends on how amiable Sarah is for you to do this. But you know, I would now at this moment in time leave the wonderful garage and go in to watch some Netflix or whatever, and then I would just sit there like a crazy person, working the action of the gun, making sure that it fires the way I like it to, right? The way it feels in my hand. Is there anything really missing? Do I hear it grating anywhere? Do I feel it? Hands are still kind of slick with the oil. Do I feel it hanging up anywhere that would be bad for it to hang up? Now would be a good time too, because you have the gun in your hands. Maybe practice some dry fire drills, clearing some imaginary foulings or some failure to feeds or jams or whatever. But in general, keeping the shop towel handy and making sure that you keep wiping it down, getting the excess grease off of it. And after a bit, there still will be some grease that's coming off of it. I don't really see any grease coming off the side here anymore. I see no grease coming out of the top, which is good because you don't want any grease to float around the ejection port. After a while, it will be pretty much fine for you to take the gun and put it away in your safe. The only thing that I would say about putting it away in the safe now is this is when the gun is going to be at its wettest. The lube is going to dry a little bit, and it will look dry when you pick it back up, but your fingers still have a little bit of oil on them, and there's, like I said, still some wet lube on the firearm. So it's now when I would say, when I put it into the safe, I'm going to make sure that I wipe off all the surfaces so there are no fingerprints left over, no areas where there can be any real corrosion situations, and just make sure that the gun is as nice as I want to pick it up and find it. And I hope that this helped. If it didn't, I'll extrapolate later, but at least now you can see how to clean your firearm. Good luck.